All right, as you can see, I've already started on this one. I've got the keel set out, I've got the brackets set up, and one thing I want to explain, I talked about in the last video, and I kind of fumbled around this. On Shad, I make a specific drawing that's included in the plans. It shows the layout and dimensions on each bracket, but the reason is Shad is different. You have 3 brackets spaced one side of the line, 4th one on the other. You need something very specific to show you how to lay it out so you don't make a mistake. So the others do not have drawings. You just have the dimensions of where they go. The thing to keep in mind is when you look at this frame, you've got a dimension. I'm just going to pull a number out of the air, say it's 6 foot. 6 foot is to the center of the frame. So you've got to remember to allow that 1/4 inch when you're setting up your bracket so that your frame is sitting over the 6 foot center line. And one of the tricks I've been sitting here laying out the rest of these this morning, it's what made me think of that. And I've got, where is one? Here's one. I've got my mark for this one, which is 8'7", and I marked on here 2 lines showing, in this case, 8'7" is the back edge of this frame. Or excuse me, it's the center line, but I've marked to the back edge of this frame, so I've got to go forward a 1/2 inch. But I've made a mark on here so that I'll know that, and I can take a little framing square, and I can line it up there, and I can actually, what I'm going to do is mark these on the keel, and I'm going to mark both sides, and now I know, because this was just resting on here, now I'm going to know where that goes. And I'll double check these dimensions, but that's a little tip there that'll help you out, and that'll give me the location of each of these, and it helps me by doing it on the strong back. I do them all at one time while I've got that in my mind, because it's very easy to get confused, get the frames in the wrong position. Slightly off is probably not really going to make a noticeable difference, but you want to do it right to start with. So take the time, mark your strong back, take your square, but I think I'm going to go ahead and lash these in place so they don't move around before I do anything else. I'll get all these in place, get them lashed to the keel. All right, as I said, I was trying something different this time. I lashed the frames to the keel, and I got to looking at them, and I really didn't like the way they moved around. They weren't that stable, so I could see that it might create a problem. So what I did is I went back and I took the ridge beams and put those in place, lashed them in, so you've got this joint and this joint lashed. Now the frame's still going to wobble this way, but it's much more stable left and right. It made it a lot easier to put the gunnels and stringers in place and hold them in with bungee cords. So first time I tried this, but I like this. I would suggest you try this on yours. It worked really well. I thought since I'm lashing on the boat, why not just cover it in the video? Artificial sinew, wax thread, best stuff in the world for lashing. I like to take an arm's length, depending on where on the boat it's going. I'm going to take just a little extra here. Cut off, say, about an arm's length. You'll find what works for you, but that works good for me, and I have about average length. Take that thread, and then you can go over here and start lashing with it. Move the camera. You start with a stopper knot. This is all covered in my book and videos I've done, so I'm not going to go over the details here. I'll wrap it around here. Doesn't really matter which. Let's do it in the front. Finish your Eskimo knot right there, which is just consists of 2 different knots, one after the other. All right, come on, pull it down into place. Then you wrap it around the frame, over the stringer, back through the frame, over the stringer, around the bottom of the frame, just over and under. And what you're doing, you're setting up kind of like a block and tackle, if you're familiar with those. But when I pull this tight, these are wrapped over this part. They're going to pull that way toward the frame and pull these 2 together. And you're going to see a gap right here. But what you have to remember is this is coming at an angle, so you got to check this side to make sure it pulls up flush. And that fools a lot of people, and sometimes I forget. Wrap it around a dowel or something to give you some purchase, and pull tight. And that pulled up pretty good. Not quite where I want, but I'm going to put a couple more turns on here. Less likely to break. You know, after you do it a while, this motion just becomes second nature. You develop a muscle memory. Now I can really pull that tight. And that pulls up in the joint, and that joint's not going anywhere. It's amazingly tight. It does have a little flex in it when you're out on the water, all these joints combined, so it's like little shock absorbers. And around, around, and over, and I'm about out of sinew. That should be about 6 to 8 times. See if I've got enough to do another one. Nope, not enough. So I'm gonna have to stop right there. I did not count, but I know it's plenty. And I'll take a screwdriver, and I'm just lifting, a little flat-bladed screwdriver, and I'm just lifting that up enough that I can push my sinew behind it. And by the way, this is one of the great things about sinew. See, it doesn't loosen up. I don't know why. You think the wax is slick, it would want to slide loose, but I guess it just binds with itself. But anyway, feed this behind it. Sometimes they're a little stubborn. There we go. I had it. There we go. Do that a couple of times. You'll get better at it. I like to do it about 3 times. And pull that tight. And that'll pull that joint even tighter. And not a lot of stretch in this sinew, and that'll rip, so that really pulls it tight. And I start looping it through itself. Kind of create some friction there. And sometimes they go just real smooth. And sometimes they're like this one, they're just a little stubborn. And it'll start tightening up and holding. Oh, it's got a little curl. Well, dadgum. And really being stubborn this time. There we go. Pull it through itself a couple more times. Take your little block for some purchase. There, pull it down really tight. And tie off a stopper knot on that. This is probably the hardest part, getting that knot to pull down near the bottom. There's a trick to it, and I slipped. That's close enough. And then scissors, razor knife, whatever, trim it off, and you've got a good tight lash joint. And just rinse and repeat over and over and over. Well, today's the day we finish the lashing up. I've got a little bit left to do, but I should have it ready by lunch to take off the strong back. But I'm going to leave it on because there's some things to do that are just easier to do here. But the only thing left is at the stern. I've got to lash the gunnels in place. I'm going to pin those, and I'll show you what I do there, what I'm talking about. I've got to trim these center stringers off. There, I always leave them long. I lay the combing up here in place just to double check everything and make sure where the combing's going to rest, and then I trim this off and round over the edges. We need to put the footrests in place, and then I need to oil these stringers, and then the frame, if I'm not, oh yeah, floorboards. I got to trim the floorboards. I cut mine a little long. We've got to trim and lash them in place, and then it'll be ready to come off, and I guess, if I'm not mistaken, next step is to skin it. So let's get started. I've done here is I drilled a 5/32 hole. Doesn't matter the size, just don't get too large. You don't want it to split your gunnel in two. I drilled a hole through the stringer, through the frame, and through out the other side on the other stringer. And I drove a pin in here. And this is not so much structural as it just holds these in place, because this is wood. Wood bends in weird ways. It doesn't always do what we want. You know, I designed these so that your gunnels don't have to be bent or anything into place. But sometimes the wood has other ideas. It may have a little curve, a little warp in it. And that's what happened here. These were moving a little on me, but I do this on all of them. So I just go back in here, clamp these, drive that dowel in, and then I cut that dowel off flush after I've got everything lashed in place. And again, that's not structural so much as it just holds this in place, keeps it from ever wanting to move up or down and showing an ugly hump under the skin. So anyway, it's lashed in place. It's not going anywhere. Well, this looks like a good place to end the video. I have the frame finished, basically. Just doing a little touch up, as I said, on the with the oil. I started out with a paintbrush, but found I like the rag better. I can do a better job. I can rub it into places it needs to go. So, I think that, unless I missed a spot, that finishes it up, and I'll just call it a day. I've still got to put the footrests in. I've got the floorboards ready to go in. Well, I've got them drilled, and I had to trim them back a little bit. I need to paint them and the combing. So it may be a day or so before I get back to this, because say, I've got to spend some time painting, and painting's a slow process. It takes 10 minutes to paint, an hour to wait on it to dry. Well, actually 2 or 3 hours to dry. Put another coat on. You need 3 or 4 coats. So that'll probably take me all day tomorrow to get that done. So I guess when I get back, we'll be putting the floorboards in and the floors. And at that point, I think we're ready to start skinning. So bye for now.